Now, if you look at services like Amazon Recognition, they are using deep learning. Specifically, they're using convolutional neural networks under the hood that are trained for you, so you don't need to worry about those. But what if I want to build my own? What's a convolutional neural network? Well, it's a deep learning network, which is a neural network with multiple layers, where the connectivity pattern really is inspired by the animal or the human visual cortex. So the connectivity between those neurons are the same, and it's inspired by that receptive field that we would have in our eyes, where we look at a specific area and try to recognize what's going on. And that's what we're trying to do in a convolutional neural network by looking at those specific areas. And so, obviously, this finds a lot of applications in image recognition, but also video recognition. So, I brought a camera with me, so I figured let's try to run a live computer vision model here on stage. And I mentioned earlier we want to give our developers and our data scientists the complete freedom of choice of what frameworks they want to use. So I decided I'm going to use a framework called Darknet, which is a framework that was created by a person called Joseph Redmond. And he wrote a research paper on a technique he called YOLO. And that actually stands for You Only Look Once. So we came up with a technique where you can run a convolutional network over a picture just once, and then identify the objects in there. And so what I'm going to try to do is I have a camera here, which is my edge location right here. And I'm going to run the default model of YOLO to identify all of the different objects that have been trained in that model. And I went ahead and I also trained a custom model in AWS using this framework to identify very specific objects that will come from the back in just a bit. And I used an Amazon EC2 P3 instance here, and I trained that model in 5 minutes. So that's pretty impressive. So let's have a look on how that would work. So if we switch on the camera here, and I flip over to my screen, what you see here is my laptop, and I'm going to start running the YOLO machine learning model onto my camera. And what you can see now here is there's a live feed, and you can see that that model is making predictions. If I zoom in a little bit, you can see that it's identifying lots of people here. We have it here, lots of people here. Get my laptop here. And you can see that it immediately identifies with a certain confidence level, if you look at the right side, on what's going on, and it's overlaying it. And this model is really, really fast. Let me show you how fast it is. If I move around here, it is reactive to my size. I go down. And if you look at the right side, it sometimes detects things like, oh, is there a dining table? That might be a couch. Is there a handbag? Those confidence scores are relatively low, so we can cut them out and just take person, which in this scenario would be a 90% score for me. The key point here is this is a really fast computer vision model. And so this is the default kind of training model that Joseph Redmond has trained this on. And so I figured, let's have some fun. I trained this model with a few custom objects. So let me load up my own custom object model here, and I bring that back up. And then if you look back at the crowd here, we have a variety of props that are coming our way. There you go, we get a unicorn right here. And feel free to pass it into the crowd. Feel free. Oh, there's a hot dog. Oh, where was that hot dog? We got a hot dog right here that is coming out there. Oh, there was something else detected. I saw something there. Unicorn. What's this person that is coming there? That person is coming here. We got a hot dog here. Oh, a hot dog man. A hot dog man is being detected right behind here. And you see how that computer vision model is really, really fast at detecting these kind of objects in real time. And all I had to do was to actually go ahead and take a variety of pictures of these objects. There we go. Of these objects and train it against that model. So lots of fun that you can have with a computer vision model. And the training of this was done in 5 minutes by me taking 100 pictures of each of those objects. And we can go back to the slides in this one. Thank you. Now you're going to say, OK, Ollie, that's cool, but thank you. Thank you. Now, you might say, that's cool. Let's have a little bit of fun. We have some unicorns, have some hot dogs that we play around with. But how does that apply to real life? Well, it turns out, if you build computer vision models like this, where you can detect in real-time objects, and not only detect them, but know exactly the boundaries around it, that is a super helpful technique for assisted driving or autonomous vehicles. We have customers such as Too Simple, name is companies called Too Simple, that build computer vision models on top of AWS to do exactly this object detection identification. And some of this is used for assisted driving in vehicles or autonomous vehicles. Same thing can apply to drones, etc. So these techniques that can now be available for you to use within minutes on P3 instances to train it against your model can be highly valuable. And if we think about a camera, well, you can apply it to documents too. Or you can even apply it to images. Think about an MRI scan that you might have. An object detection model can help you identify, for example, cancerous cells in an MRI scan. Now, I mentioned P3. I mentioned I trained that model on a very powerful compute instance. So let me spend a little bit of time on compute. Let me spend a little bit of time on how we can deploy our applications. And where traditionally we had physical servers that we needed to install and deploy our applications, we now have the choice to actually choose virtual machines, EC2 instances in AWS. But we can also look at maybe using containers and containerization to deploy it out all the way to serverless. So let me spend a little bit of time on each of those to have a look at what is available to you on the AWS platform. I mean, virtual machines, they really have made our life great, right? It emulates physical infrastructure, and we can run a virtual machine, create an image, put it up, put it down, scale it out completely on demand. And that is really great. If you have existing software that you want to migrate onto AWS, have a look at those virtual machines. And when I say virtual machines, we call them EC2s. There are different EC2 instance types. And again, we want to give you the freedom of choice to optimize your virtual machines to the workload that you're having. No matter if you have an application that consumes a lot of memory, a lot of GPU, a lot of storage, a lot of compute, you have the full spectrum, all the way from the tiniest, smallest, little burstable T2 instances, all the way to some of our field programmable gate area F1 instances. And in addition to that, you can attach elastic GPUs to it if you need that power, and even better, we have the spot instance model that allows you to run these virtual machines at an extremely low cost based on the market rate. Now, the other thing that I would say is virtual machines are great, but if I develop something on my laptop and it runs there and I deploy it out to a virtual machine, it might or might not run because there are dependencies that might be different between the operating system on my laptop and what I have installed there and the virtual machine. And so that was one of the reasons we came up with, the open source community came up with the ideas of containers. Package all your libraries and dependencies in a container and ship it out. And what runs on my laptop would run on a machine. Great. And it allows me to be even way more efficient around that compute that I'm using. Fast startup of a container, fast tear down of a container. That gives us developer extreme agilities. And we have services such as the Elastic Container Service that gives you that container management system fully managed and highly scalable. Right? You don't need to worry about your cluster, how do you manage it? You don't need to worry about the scheduling of your container, how do I orchestrate this? And of course, deep integration into all the other AWS services. Security services, networking services, load balancing services, etc. And a lot of our customers are doing amazing things in production with containers. No matter if it's AdRoll or BuzzFeed or Meetup or Dash, all of these companies are using containers to move faster and not focus on managing their clusters, but use ECS. And so our customers went out there saying, OK, ECS is great, but you know what? I actually like Kubernetes a lot. And so they said, could you make it a little bit easier for me to run Kubernetes? And so last year, we announced EKS, the Elastic Container Service for Kubernetes, which is really a platform that allows you that production-grade Kubernetes installation. You don't need to worry about your Kubernetes master. Right? We manage that for you. Of course, seamless and native integration into all the different AWS services, especially the networking and security services. We really want to make AWS the best place for you to run Kubernetes. And as such, we contribute to the open source community of Kubernetes to make it more efficient, but also we're not doing that alone. We have an entire partner ecosystem that helps you to run Kubernetes in the cloud more efficiently. And it's certified. Certified to an upstream level. It's certified Kubernetes. You can run certified Kubernetes in EKS. And a lot of our customers said, well, that's great, thank you for that. We immediately want to use EKS. Companies like Pinterest, LogicWorks, Sumo Logic, GoDaddy, that now are running Kubernetes workload fully managed in AWS. And so if we're builders, I'd say, you know, we want to build. We want to manage clusters. We said, could we take it one step further? Let's take it one step further. Let's create AWS Fargate. And so what AWS Fargate allows you to do is it allows you to run your container and you don't need to care about infrastructure whatsoever. We manage everything for you and you just need to manage at the container level. You don't care about the underlying infrastructure. It allows you to easily launch your container, scale it out. We need to take care of that. You just focus on your container. And the best part, resource-based pricing. You only pay for what you use when you use it. That's fantastic as a builder. I can focus on building what I want to build. And guess what? Of course, that's available for both ECS, but also for EKS. Fargate for ECS, Fargate for EKS. Allowing us to really focus on building. And if I talk about building, why serverless? Serverless provides you with extreme developer productivity because it allows me as a developer to focus purely on my code. Don't need to worry about infrastructure at all. So really just focus on your business logic. What does that mean? Well, if you build an architecture, you need a little bit more than just compute. You need coordination, you need queuings, you need messaging, you need data, you need identity, you need monitoring, auditing, network. All of these AWS services here are serverless. You use them, we manage them, highly available, highly scalable for you, and you don't need to worry about the underlying infrastructure. That's a fundamental change of how you build applications. Because if you start building serverless applications, not only, obviously, you don't need to manage servers, but you have complete flexible scalability. You don't need to think about an auto-scaling policy or how you need to over-provision for something or any of that stuff. That's our problem. You just focus on building. We scale it for you. Do you need to focus about availability? Well, guess what? Why do we have availability zones? So that you can run in multiple availability zones at the same time, ensuring a high availability. If you build serverless, we do that for you. And lastly, really powerful. If you take something like AWS Lambda, you only pay for what you use when you use it. And when I say that, I mean, if you run your piece of code on AWS Lambda, we look at the execution time of your piece of code, the milliseconds of execution time of your piece of code. And that's what we're charging you for. Meaning that you can have an application sit there for the next million visitors to come, or the next million requests to come. But if there's no request, it costs you nothing. And that's a fundamental game changer because it allows us to remove that complete idle capacity that we used to pay for and say, nah, not my problem anymore. I just pay for what I use. And that's so compelling that many customers are building serverless applications on top of AWS. No matter if it's Coca-Cola, iRobot, AirAsia, Malaysia, Verizon, Thomson Reuters, National Geographic, ShareChat. You know ShareChat, right? ShareChat uses AWS serverless architectures. Great stuff. And what that means for us as builders, we have the freedom of choice of what we're building on. On virtual machines, the broadest spectrum of virtual machines that you find in AWS than any other cloud provider. You pick and choose what works for you for an application that you might not have re-platformed yet. And when you re-platform, look at containers. Containers are great, giving you extreme agility as a builder. And then from there, you architect for cloud-ready applications to a point where it's completely serverless, allowing you to focus completely on your business logic rather than anything else, to a point where you can build event-driven architectures that just work. And so that brings me to the point of these kind of 21st century architectures. And we reimagined the way we're building applications, just the way we did maybe decades ago. It has completely fundamentally changed. And with that in mind, we want you to architect with best practices in mind. Security is always job zero, but you also want to be operationally excellent, right? You want to streamline, you want to be reliable, you want to be efficient and get performance out of your architectures that you're building, and you want to run it cost effectively. That's why we released the well-architected framework that really helps you to dive into those different pillars and gives you advice on how to build these architectures with these pillars in mind. And let me spend a moment on that security pillar. If you look at that security pillar, there are multiple principles. How do you identify? How do you detect? How do you build controls around it? How do you protect your infrastructure? How do you protect your data? How do we respond to incidents? If you look at that pillar, well, let's take back these 125 services that Bikram showed earlier. You look down here. Those are all security and compliance-specific services. You want to manage your identities, you want to have full control of your access, there are services to help you do that. You want to monitor, log, and audit everything, there are services like CloudTrail Config to do that. You want to report it out, you want a web application firewall, you want to protect yourself against distributed denial of service attack, AWS Shield can help you do that. You want to configure complex configuration, AWS Service Catalog can do that, pre-prov workloads with a click of a button. You can group accounts together, you can manage all your resources. Look at those services and really build with that well-architected framework in mind. And one more thing, encrypt. Everything should be encrypted. Why do I say ubiquitous encryption? Well, if we think encryption, we think data. Okay, I got to encrypt data. No, no, no. You encrypt everywhere. You encrypt in transit. Any incoming request should use certificates. We have the Amazon Certificate Manager. Use it. Put in a load balancer, TLS connection, encrypt that. You store it at rest, no matter where you store it, S3, EBS, RDS, etc., enable encryption. And now you're going to say, okay, click of a button, cool, right? So that means Amazon encrypts it for me. Yes, if you want, we do that for you. But if you want to bring your own encryption keys, well, KMS, the key management service, can help you do that. And lastly, look at then restricting that access to those encryption keys and make it fully auditable, using things like AWS CloudTrail to know exactly who can access what and have full control over when somebody accesses something and can decrypt it. And don't forget, we create a secure platform with security always being job zero, the first thing in mind for us as AWS as a platform. But security is everyone's job. When you build an application, when you build an architecture, look at that security pillar and build with those best practices and those services that we provide you. And so I want to leave you with 4 things. What is changing for today's builders? We talked about 4 main areas. First one is more data can be great. It can enable new business models, as we heard. It's sometimes fundamental to the business that we're building. But more data requires different techniques, different services that you use to actually derive insights. So look at those modern data architectures that we talked about today on how those services can help you to focus more of your effort on analytics rather than on data preparation. And then when you've done that, build machine learning model around it. We want to democratize machine learning for anyone to use, any developer, any data scientist. Have a look what's available, start building your machine learning models, or start using our fully managed application services in our machine learning stack. And as you start building new applications, as you start to re-architect or re-platform some of the existing applications, put your focus on the application and business logic, not the infrastructure. Fargate, AWS Lambda, serverless concepts, containerization, look at all these things. If they work for you, it's a lot easier and a lot faster for you to evolve with what you deploy. And lastly, I cannot emphasize this enough, but the well-architected framework is a great framework. Have a look at it. Architect with those best practices in mind to really get the most out of the AWS platform. And if you have any concerns or questions, talk to us. We got great solutions architects out there that can help you design some of the best architectures with all these best practices in mind. Now with that, I want to thank you all for your attention. And I'd say, we're all builders in this room, so let's go out there and build. Thank you.